ISIL stand for. The Quran does not support that.
It's almost as if you're saying that average Christians support the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan's symbol was what? The burning cross.
Yes.
The burning cross. Are you going to blame Christians and say, I'm not going to let Christians come into any country because you know what? The Klan, is a Christian organization. And they're an extremist organization, so all Christians are extremists. I think that's simplistic in the extreme.
Thank you, Mr. Christian. And as an attorney, I want to push you a little bit on what is going on now in the Middle East.
Yes. Between
the Emirates, UAE, Qatar,
yes.
Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
What do you have to say to that?
Well, it's very unfortunate, first of all, that the Arab brothers and sisters are divided. I have been to Qatar as a guest of Sheikh Hamza and Sheikh Al Thani, and I've been to Saudi as a guest of the royal family, Princess Madari. In 2010, we went to Riyadh. They wanted to set up a non-profit here for education, and I'd known Colonel Al-Rakaf, the Major Al-Rakaf at the embassy. Was one of my clients is an Emir Sheikh Salim Diaby, who's fluent in Arabic, and he used to do the Hajj for the embassy. So they knew him, and he gave them my information, and I was happy to have been there. And I think the future of the Gulf, the future of the Arab world requires a degree of diplomacy that avoids confrontation, because one of the things that you see happening is where the Arab world cannot unite on principle that focuses on non-interference in the internal affairs of the respective countries and cooperation, then you find this sort of civil war as between Saudi Arabia and Yemen, and within Libya you have maybe Qatar supporting one side and Egypt and Saudi supporting the other side.
And in Syria we see America supporting one side, Russia supporting the other side.
And who's suffering? They say the Ummah, the people in the street,
right?
The ordinary person of Muslim persuasion. They're the ones who are suffering. Their country has been destroyed. The infrastructure has been destroyed. The cities, Aleppo, the history, Palmyra, the crime, Mosul. That mosque has been there for 1,000 years, destroyed. It's just, when I look at it, I say to myself, people are not thinking. They've gone mad. So the fact is, whatever Qatar may have done, I think I think they can make criticism also of Saudi Arabia. I think they need to find some.
And they can make criticism of United Arab Emirates.
Absolutely, because in those countries there are people who supported extremism as well. One can make criticism of the United States. When I was in at Georgetown University Law Center, the first war was coming out, the first Gulf War. I'm supposed to be studying for my bar exam. I found myself downtown in a demonstration against war. It's not because I agreed that Saddam Hussein should have gone into Kuwait, but I felt that we had to give the United Nations a little more time. We should try to get him to withdraw, because I felt that once the war started, it would open up a Pandora's box, and it would lead to endless war in the Middle East. Our worst fears have come to pass. Since that war in 1991, that area of the world has been in constant turmoil, and as a result, you've seen the growth of extremist organizations like Al-Qaeda, ISIS. Sometimes we need to be able to find non-lethal means to resolve conflict. We have to find ways other than military expeditions to end conflict, because when you sometimes embark on a military expedition, as in the case of the United States and the Western powers, to evict Iraq, justifiably so in degree, from Kuwait, and then you create a vacuum, then the nature abhors a vacuum, then all kinds of things can happen that are unintended. There can be what you call unintended consequences. And I think the sort of turmoil and extremism we see now, because we have resorted sometimes too quick to military options, is what is hurting the entire Middle East. And we don't want it to affect sub-Saharan Africa, because we have Boko Haram in Nigeria, and I'm very concerned about Al-Shabaab in Somalia, and I'm concerned that those organizations can get adherents where people are in despair. People have no education, they have limited economic opportunity, they have not embraced the principles of civil society. You can get people being drawn to extremism. And I think as educators, as media people, as governments that are wise, we have to find ways to have conferences where people learn how to resolve conflict without resort to religious animosity, religious hatred. We need people to be majestic in their being able to bring us together and not drive us apart.
So in the beginning of this conversation, you mentioned the Civil War, Nigeria's Civil War.
Biafra.
The Biafra War. So I'm more interested.
As a matter of fact, as a child of the Igbo military caste, of which Ojukwu was part of that. So when they started attacking the Igbo officers, a lot of their families who lived along the bases and the barracks in the north, they attacked them as well. Then the other Igbos who had gone north as traders and professionals, as teachers, they attacked them as well. So they started running back to eastern Nigeria, Igbo territory, and the people who were Hausa in that area, for whatever reason, they attacked them, and that's how the Civil War started. And I think we need to learn our history and understand our history and not get into such sort of behavioral patterns that instigate the old divisions.
So you mentioned that mentality of Biafra should be forgotten.
I believe it is time for one Nigeria, it is time for one Africa. I mean, we can maintain our dignity and identity, but within a greater whole. Here you have United States, you have people who are Irish American, people who are German American, you have people who are Jewish American, you have people who are African American, but we still live and work active. Because remember, when, for instance, during the war, World War II, the United States and Britain had to face the Germans. 2.8 million Africans and West Indians, mostly Africans, because our islands don't have that many people, helped Britain. Another million East Indians from India, and what is Pakistan today, helped Britain. Without those resources, without those persons, Britain would not have survived. Even here in the United States, you had African Americans, the famous Tuskegee Airmen, fighting for freedom overseas they did not enjoy at home. So if they had allowed themselves to be taken by appeal to racial and ethnic animosity, they'd have not given their support to the freedom struggle. Similarly, in societies that are settled, where people can open a mosque, open a synagogue, open a church, what you have happening is that society is more attractive, and people will visit, invest, and settle in that society. Societies where people are fighting over religion, burning churches, burning mosques, burning synagogues, hanging people because they're Muslim, hanging people because they're Christian, cutting off their heads. Who wants to visit that society?
Wow.
Nobody wants to visit that society. You don't hear of any cruise ships going to those societies. You don't have any tourism in those societies. Nobody wants to go take a vacation there. People go to countries where people have learned how to resolve their differences peacefully. You go by the beach, you take a little drink, you go to the park, you take pictures, you go by the monument, you take a picture. But if you're in a society where people are blowing up monuments, because that monument was built by a guy 1,000 years ago who was not on my side, and then he would blow up your monument, which was built 1,000 years ago because he's not on your side. Where are all our antiquities? Where are our museums? All of these things are tourist attractions that people from all over the world want to visit and see. So we have to look at this whole Igbo Hausa schism in a more universal, humanitarian, intelligent light. If we just give into our passions, if we give into our hates, every time there's an issue, we appeal to that base instinct, then that becomes very, what you call, backward thinking. If, on the other hand, we can understand the history and the hurts of the Nigerian Civil War of 1967-70, we can then build a better Nigeria and a better Africa. Because tribalism, tribal hatreds, divide and rule, always allow for greater powers to come and rip off your resources. So while you're busy fighting each other,
they are taking your resources. So, congratulations, Mr. Christian. You was recently honored the GSCE, which is in the highest national, award in Ethiopia. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I feel great about it. For 23 years, we worked very hard for Ethiopia and Africa. We have been servants of the Crown Council. Prince Selassie now is looking to bring clean water to Ethiopia and other parts of Africa through the Argonaut system. The Argonaut system was developed by NASA technology. When the space explorers are in the shuttle, they can't bring water to them every week, to bathe and to drink. They have to recycle their water, and it's a very good machine because a lot of the parasitic organisms like worms and other bacteria elements that to be found in stagnant water pools that are in villages creates health problems in African villages. So if we can get clean water systems, we'll improve healthcare. If we can improve healthcare, we have better results in educational opportunity, because people are now healthy, they're energetic, they're not falling asleep, they're not sick. They can now be able to absorb the education that we are going to put forth for them. And so it all starts with healthcare. If you don't have a healthy population, you cannot have an educated population, because health and education are inextricably linked. So these are the kind of projects that Prince Ermias Haile Selassie, the grandson of Emperor Selassie.
I spoke to him the other day.
Yes, these are the things that he has been able to pioneer with General Gregory Copley of the Strategic Services Organization. So the Crown Council and ourselves have worked well together, and our law firm, Mr. Christian, certainly great support. We are happy to know that we're making our own little contribution to the onward march of African civilization.
Yeah, and also to mention your idea, on Victory One TV, which right now we are live.
Victory One TV came about because I felt in the Metro DC Washington area, which is a significant African descendant population. DC is 65% African American. When I came, it was 75%. We need a platform that can focus on community development of the African diaspora and bring a better message of Africa. Lots of times we get a message of Africa, we never get to see it in the inside of an African physics lab. We never get to see inside the interior of an African factory making anything. We never get to see African pilots flying planes. We never get to see African farmers and their farms growing a bountiful crop. We never get to see the state-of-the-art fishing facilities that exist in many African countries. We never get to see inside of the best hotels in Africa. There are very nice hotels in Nigeria and other places. All we see are examples of starving children, burning villages, squabbling tribes, negative images. So we need to craft an image that is more objective, meaning it portrays the whole spectrum. We do have problems in Africa, and we must not put those or sweep those under the carpet. We have to explore those so we can find meaningful solutions. Yeah. But we also have to show all the great things that are happening in Africa with its other partners in Asia and Europe and South America, North America. We need to see those images, because what those images that are positive really do is inspires young persons to be proud about their heritage, and by being proud, to be more committed to aspiring to better things and to greater things.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Christian. Yes. We'll continue on this show to explore partnership with Victory One TV and
Central Africa Broadcasting Corporation
and Central Africa Broadcasting Network Corporation.
Because the fact of the matter is, we are on the same page, and that's why we've entered today, the 28th of June 2017, a strategic alliance.
Yes.
So working together, the two brothers who, a couple hundred years ago, yes. Abdul, we may have been on the beach talking, and someone grabbed me, yes. took me over to Brazil, they grabbed you, and they took you over to Jamaica.
Right.
But here we are. Here we are.
Here we are together.
Yes.
It's nice, talking to you.
Work with them to better mankind and humankind in general. And I feel it's an honor and privilege to associate with you, sir.
Thank you so much. It's my honor to be, to be here with you today.
Yes, indeed.
And I will also bring you back on the show, to further explore, and talk about, African innovation and entrepreneurship.
Yes,
which is very central.
Yes. Because we have to be bridges, as you said earlier, for technology transfer and expertise transfer, and we need to meet on that basis so that we are able to produce more of that which we consume in technology. I want to see within the next 10 years an aviation industry in Africa. I want to see within the next 10 years a telephone industry in Africa where we can make all
Ethiopia
telephones.
They're already developing a very huge...
Yes. Nigeria has a space agency.
Yes.
Ethiopia wants within the next 5 years to launch its rockets, because right now Nigeria is launching satellites, but they're using platforms, I think, in India and China, maybe Russia as well. So it'd be good to see that sort of development where we have that local competence. And so that's what I meant when you asked me, what does the African Diaspora Development Activist title mean to me? Is being united, effective, productive. Wow. If we're united, right, we can be effective. Right. And if we're effective, then of course we must be productive. You know, so I believe that the time is now, and that we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Christian, and thank you everyone, you know, for joining me today on the Diaspora Today show. I will see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Hello everyone, welcome to the Diaspora Show on Center Africa Channel TV station. I'm your host today. My name is Abdul Rashid Abubakar. On today's show, I have here with me a very successful, brilliant and unique individual. You will all enjoy the show today, I promise you that. I'm talking about Dr. Mima Nedeljkovic. Dr. Mima, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Rashid. My pleasure.
It's very fantastic to know that you spent more than 40 years working across the African continent. What inspires you about Africa? Can you tell me?
Well, I started there. I was 6 months old when the family moved to Ethiopia. I'm originally from today's Serbia, born in Belgrade, but I grew up my first 10 years in Addis Ababa, in Ethiopia. So the interest begins from day one, practically. And thereafter, my whole career has one way or another been involved with Africa, either in the business side or the U.S. government side.
So you spent close to 40 years working in the African continent. Tell me, where do you see Africa in the next 10 years?
Very good question. I have the longitudinal view, very much so, and part of my excitement really on the continent is exactly what's happened very aggressively and progressively in the last few years. You know, really since independence, if you will, you had a period of time that the continent was developing relatively slowly. But I think we've really seen a kind of a peaking, particularly in the private sector development side. The investment, I mean, this last 5 to 10 years has been massive, massive growth of the private sector, the middle, sort of the growing middle class, let's call it the spending class. I think the big changes on the continent are, I mean, there's twofold, the major ones. One is the rapid growth of the population. We're going to be doubling to almost 2 billion in the continent. And the other major factor is urbanization, because we're getting to almost 50% urban. Lifestyles are changing. You know, people, the Africa is no longer just the bush and the village. It's actually the urban centers. It's the Lagoses, Luandas, Nairobis, Kinshasas of the world.
So, let's talk about the focus of IGD in terms of agribusiness, power. How is this realistic?
Well, several things. You know, IGD, you know, we started about, I think, 12 years ago now with the business community in Seattle, Washington. And the reason for the business community coming together was post 9/11, basically saying, look, what is our role as business? All about what is really happening in the world. The terrorism is called poverty. It's called despair. It's people with no future. So what is our role as business leaders and all about that? What is our role? It's called growth. It's called economic growth. It's called inclusive growth. So really our business leaders, as they came together, starting with Seattle, Washington, and across the U.S., and across the world, and increasingly, and now we're more than 50% of our business leaders, we've got what we call born and bred African business leaders coming from the continent, are looking at how can they be stimulating the sort of growth that really uplifts people. That's what it's all about. In the end, fighting poverty, we don't even use the term fighting poverty, we call it really pushing for inclusive growth. We're all about